So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name's Camilla. I handle a lot of our market intelligence and client conversations around Kubrick. We've been seeing this topic jump top of mind with so many of our clients. We thought we would find a bit of time to bring two of our Gen AI specialists, Julia and Jess, onto a call, bring some stories to life, talk about the POCs that are working, the POCs that aren't, and what it takes to get them through to MVP. So a quick scene set before we dive into the conversation. As most people know, Gen AI right now is progressing rapidly through Gartner's hype cycle. That kind of predictive lens of where it's going to end up is seeing aspects of the technology like RAG and Gen AI enabled virtual assistants slated to accelerate through that hype cycle and into kind of everyday productivity in just less than 2 years. We're really in that moment of tension between the trough of disillusionment where it sits now and the future focus of what Gen AI could bring to our everyday lives and our functions. And so thinking about it in that context, whereby 90%, as many as 90% of Gen AI projects are starting to fail beyond POC stage, according to one study in CIO magazine recently, there's this huge opportunity and pressure from society at large, I think, to get our hands on what that value of Gen AI can really be and understand how this technology, which is thoroughly well developed from a technical standpoint, actually looks like in practice with the people and the processes we're trying to embed it in. So that's the crux of this conversation today. We're focusing on people and process. There's so much at stake here, there's early discussions. So I wanted to bring in Jess and Julia, who have been out in the field, kind of making that happen for Gen AI, to kind of talk about their stories and experiences of the successes and failures and talk about what goes wrong, but more importantly, what can go right. So let's dive into the conversation. We're going to frame this around those common pitfalls, those common challenges, and there's really kind of different mindsets and approaches you can take to overcome those. So let's not waste any more of our time. Julia, over to you. What is that kind of first pitfall you're seeing when you're out on site with our clients?
Yeah, thanks, Cam. So I think for me, it's the defining of the use case. People don't necessarily do this very well. So that use case has got to be need driven and not technology driven. I've seen a lot of cases where technology leaders, they get very excited about these different use cases and they're not really thinking about the business. And what we do is we go in and we do these proof of concepts for them, but then we find out there's actually no business buy-in or domain experts who are helping to build the solutions, which is really important in Gen AI, in particular RAG, and there's no budget. And therefore that proof of concept just completely fails and it's not impactful and we can't move to production. Jess, what have you seen with your clients?
Yeah, I think I've seen a really similar point. And to your point, the kind of needs driven and business criticality is essential when selecting a use case for AI. I think what many people fail to consider is that maturity and low complexity are just as crucial for that kind of decision matrix. Choosing the right process determines whether your AI product will scale successfully or whether it will remain stuck in POC limbo. And I think why this matters, a mature business critical process, it's well understood, widely adopted, already valued by leadership probably. It's a business critical, mature process will have a direct impact on revenue, efficiency, maybe compliance. So securing budget, stakeholder buy-in becomes a lot easier if you've actually considered those things from the start. In contrast, AI projects that are built on immature, undefined processes normally lack a clear path forward. So you might have an ambiguity in requirements, you might have data challenges or an unclear success criteria. And I think in general, adoption is kind of higher when AI is applied to those processes because employees will normally understand that process, which means when they come to adopting your product that you've built, it's almost a natural enhancement instead of a completely new solution. So if you choose a niche, experimental, low priority process, you risk developing a solution that lacks that exec support and probably budget for scaling, misalignment with business needs because that kind of isn't clear from the get-go. I think just to give an example of this, and then Julia, I'd love to get your perspective on this more, is actually like a prime example of what I would see as a mature, potentially high impact AI use case in insurance would be automated claims processes and fraud detection. This process is critical to revenue, efficiency, customer experience. Slow, inaccurate claims process increases costs, compliance risks, and customer churn. So because of this, you're like securing budget, stakeholder buy-in, will become a lot easier because they already understand the financial impact of fraud and the inefficiencies that that could cause. And you can then scale into different areas of insurance, auto, health, property, whatever. You can really scale that upwards as you go. And what's your perspective? Have you seen similar?
Yeah, so I think your point around picking that business critical process is really important. I read a great article the other day when I was preparing for this talk around what AI leaders are doing, that they are the people who are moving from proof of concept to MVP, and what are they doing? And they do two key things. So the first one, as you say, Jess, is picking that business critical process. And the second one is focusing on a small number of use cases rather than trying to go at everything in the business. Just pick the ones that are actually going to be the big wins for the business. I've seen this actually recently with my project. We're trying to automate some of the process for procurement for a large FMCG business. And it's a really great project because we're using AI in a lot of different areas. And what's been great is the actual use cases have been so well defined. They've understood what the benefit to end users are. They've also got them on board from day one in that proof of concept stage, which is really important. And the other thing that they've done is they very clearly defined the success criteria. And I think that moves nicely onto our second key pitfall is once you've got that use case, how are you defining the success criteria? So in my experience, I've seen different projects where there's this tendency to measure success in just technical terms. So things like latencies of models, the accuracy or the precision. And that's really important. However, they're often missing what is the business value and what is the success criteria for that. So, for example, is it going to decrease costs or increase revenue or increase user satisfaction? And how do you then measure that in the project? And that sort of criteria is needed from the proof of concept stage. What about you, Jess, when it comes to defining success criteria?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we kind of had this wave of everyone needing to fill their data teams and it being like technological problems and let's just build things and figure it out. And now we're shifting to like actually what's the value? And I think that's not just Gen AI, that's like holistically all data projects, right? I think there was a big rush to build those and forget about the success and the value behind those. So I agree. I think I'm seeing it in generative AI solutions as well as other ones is that failure to define clear success criteria before advancing to proof of concept stage. You should really be thinking about it. I think without those explicit measurable metrics, projects will probably misalign with those business objectives as we spoke about earlier. Maybe underwhelming results, wasted investment, and potential like non-compliance as well. I've got an example I can talk to where we've done this well recently in the pharmaceutical industry, where subject matter experts in research and development departments have historically spent significant time answering queries on standard operating procedures and regulatory processes. We've introduced a chatbot to handle these repetitive questions, which allows SMEs can refocus on critical high-value tasks like lab research, drug development. While this solution brings clear benefits like time efficiency, cost savings, compliance assurance, what I would suggest for people is to think about, are those benefits enough of a compelling case alone? Or do you actually need to think about it beyond those metrics and actually think about the tangible business impact? What I mean by that is the real success criteria of those things I've just discussed there, like time efficiency, cost saving, compliance, is does this accelerate drug development and reduce time to market of a new drug for pharmaceuticals? Does it mitigate the risk of non-compliance, which could lead to a potential multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar fine? And does that solution fit within the broader kind of research and development objectives of the business? And I think it's that ability to step back and go, okay, we've got cost efficiencies, we've got time savings. I save someone 3 weeks a year for 100 users. That's great. But what does that actually mean? And I think we just need to dig a bit deeper into what that really means and what impact they can have to create a compelling case to get that beyond proof of concept stage. And have you got any examples, Julia? I'd be interested to hear of kind of teams struggling to define a strong business case. What frameworks or methods would you recommend to people trying to understand and dig into that?
Yeah, so I would go back to basics. So I would think about that sort of matrix of technical feasibility along one side and then value across the other. And I would bring different stakeholders, so end users, key business people, and also technical teams into that conversation and try to map out the different business opportunities for AI. So again, you've got to be thinking about is AI the right solution for these use cases? So, for example, AI is great with helping with repetitive, time-consuming tasks, and I'd map that out and I'd focus on those high-value, low-risk projects and start having conversations with stakeholders really early. So I've seen on my current project, it's been really successful because our team is filled with people who've got a range of experience. So this project, as I mentioned, is within the FMCG space within procurement. So within our team, we have the technical people who are building the solution. We then have product owners who are actually ex-buyers within procurement, which is really helpful because we get so much insight from them. And then we have our end users, the buyers, and everyone's involved in a iterative process for this application. So we are currently building something for them that they're using, but then they're coming back to us with feedback all the time and really working in that agile way, even at this proof of concept stage. And because of that, we're very sure that it's then going to easily move into that MVP.
Yeah, and
That's
remembering
amazing.
that agile process in the end-to-end stage of that is critical, and getting that user feedback not just from the requesters, actually going beyond. It sounds like your team have gone above and beyond to make sure you've got the variety of different personas to make sure you're getting value in all different areas and not focusing on one. That's
Yeah,
really interesting.
absolutely. And I think people need to remember that for Gen AI to work well, because you're dealing with that natural language, we're building systems for end users where we don't necessarily have the domain knowledge. So, for example, similar to your pharma case, we're building this chatbot around procurement. I'm by no means a procurement domain specialist. So I really need the buyers to come in and say, yes, that response from the retrieval augmented generation chatbot is correct, or no, it's not. And then I have to go away and modify my prompt to that. So it's really important, as I was saying, to have those people in from day one because they're then going to make your project a success.
Yeah, and the technical challenges there are things that are often forgotten about, right? Like the accuracy and the time that it takes for someone to actually feed that domain knowledge in is something that you can't automate and shouldn't automate, because you want to validate that what you're building is accurate to what expectations are. I think that leads us on really nicely to our final pitfall, actually. Based on kind of the agile way. And there's the failing fast myth that big tech companies love to do. There's a strong fail fast innovation culture in kind of the big tech industry that we're seeing even in the past couple of days with DeepSeek's release of their open source models. But for corporate business, the reality is a little bit different. We can't really afford to invest in endless proof of concepts without clear results. We're seeing major clients pause their proof of concept developments entirely, shifting focus on more to existing MVPs. This is helping efforts, but it is abandoning valuable use cases that could drive meaningful impact. I think the key to overcoming this pitfall is being intentional from the start, kind of using what we've discussed in this webinar of defining the use case and setting out that success criteria. But instead of launching proof of concept with no clear path forward, the way I've seen success is exactly that. The success criteria being defined up front, the metrics for accuracy, adoption, thinking about adoption early on, business value, and business impact in the way we've discussed. Having an actual structured roadmap and milestones of when you're going to get to certain places is helpful and slightly non-agile, but quite helpful in a corporate world to know when that's going to be coming to create buy-in and trust with your exec sponsors. Repeatable solutions, ensuring that AI investments aren't one-off but scalable across teams. And we can talk a little bit about how I think you should do that in a second. And I think finally you want to make sure that you can actually quantify the value, which seems really obvious, but you need to be able to quantify the value and be able to discuss that to create that strong business case. And I think in general, my advice would be let the big tech companies provide the resources, the open AI source AI models like DeepSeek's AI's latest release, right? I'm going to go and use that probably to help with evaluation and accuracy of building chatbots, and let the role of in our corporate functions to be to build the outcome focused solutions on top of that. So I don't think it's the technology itself that's failing. I think it's the failure to demonstrate value that causes AI projects to stall. So yeah, I think it's really, we need to tie it to business outcomes and not just innovation for innovation's sake. And Julia, I think adoption is one of the kind of more forgotten aspects in any technology project. It's definitely a challenge I've had culturally in the past. What's one tip you would give to someone to avoid that sort of failing fast and to increase adoption?
Yeah, so I think it's prioritizing end users of the applications from the proof of concept stage. So engage with them from the start, because then you're ensuring that the AI tool actually aligns with their real needs. You can show them quick wins, but also if there's any resistance to the tool, then those discussions can happen very early. So, for example, with large language models, hallucinations, that is a feature of them. It's not a bug. And the sooner that people understand that, it's a lot more helpful for us as the technical team, but it also allows us to then deliver that value to them a lot quicker. So I think really it also comes down to having that common language where you have business leaders, non-technical people who can understand AI. And that's not just ChatGPT, that's going beyond that. I think that's really important. So yeah, that would be my top tip, prioritize the end users.
And how have you approached that? Is that with demos to the end users? And can you talk me through a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of in reference to that project I was talking about earlier, we've had them on from day one and we operate in this agile way. So, we are still building a solution, they're using it, they're giving feedback, and it's just this cycle, which has led us to make some really great projects for them.
Great. Camilla, I don't know before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on kind of the three common pitfalls.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some other kind of wrappers to add. I think when we talk about milestones and accuracy and kind of how we deliver buy-in and kind of progress. I think the most important thing is showing the art of the possible with this. And this comes down to a kind of a combination of expectation management, success criteria, and also that business buy-in. So a few of the projects that I've been working on in our teams, I think the most successful thing we've seen is underlying the kind of lowest bound of possibility because that really builds buy-in. So, for instance, a massive project that we're doing with a major airline, a chatbot that we're building there, the lowest bound of possibility, a 10% improvement on the efficiency of our maintenance workers who are using this chatbot to construct their plans for scheduling airplane fixes. The 10% increase in efficiency on their work leads to 10x ROI on the product that we've delivered. That's the lowest bound of possibility. And that kind of comparison between the investment a business needs to make in a tool like this and your team and the people who are delivering and the technology behind it with the lowest bound of possibility makes it so much easier to get that buy-in. So now when we're going to our stakeholders and we're developing the product into MVP and production and going, what does 50% efficiency look like? That's our next goal. That's music to their ears. That's going from 10x ROI on the investment they've made in this tool to thinking about millions in cost savings becoming extremely tangible. We've got a similar kind of ability to get that kind of buy-in from a project that we've been doing with a professor at UCL, looking at the ways that we can use generative AI to uncover kind of bias in the ways that they conduct systematic reviews of research. They're totally different use cases, totally different domains. But by showing this kind of art of the possible of what does a 50% increase in the time spent doing this research assisted by Gen AI do for your kind of research down the line, it doesn't need to be 100% accurate. And accuracy is a very different thing from a time save, I think. And so kind of resetting those bounds. But that's also something I want to get into. Kind of we've gone through some of the pitfalls, we've gone through kind of some of those key steps, but I'm wondering, Jess, Julia, we've both kind of spoken about some of the kind of surprises you've had in the ways that you've been able to take an unexpected route to success. And I think, Jess, one thing we've talked about is this question of accuracy quite a lot. Unsurprisingly, Gen AI is in the firing line for accuracy. If we're going to put trust in machines that can't be berated, can't have their name on the line, if something goes wrong, people are nervous to do that. But at the same time, we have to stop and think about How much do we trust processes being done by humans just because we've got a name and a face to put blame to? And how can we kind of demonstrate that Gen AI actually improves governance and accuracy in these processes in a positive way? So, just kind of what are some of those conversations you've been having with your stakeholders, and how have you kind of brought them on the journey with reimagining accuracy and trying not to ask people to look for 100% accuracy when ultimately we don't have that necessarily in our everyday processes?
Yeah, I think, and Camilla knows this is my favorite topic at the moment, my tagline of govern the ungovernable, because actually a lot of the processes that we are working on have previously not been governed. So for the example I referenced earlier, it's messages in Teams and Outlook and various side channels that's not governed. No one really knows the accuracy of a human's response. So we're kind of setting that baseline from the start again and actually allowing us to have a governed process. But I think that sort of relying on like many AI projects have sort of lacked that oversight or consistency historically, relying on human judgment basically rather than structured rules. And I think while the accuracy being lower presents risk, it also offers the opportunity to bring governance where there was none before, essentially, hence my govern the ungovernable quote. But governance isn't just about sort of compliance checkboxes or exact approval. I think it requires that time from people to ensure that the governance is there. So it shouldn't necessarily be just by how well it performs against human decision making. It should also be how much time we've invested to train, refine, and measure AI's effectiveness in real world scenarios. I think the mistake that I'm seeing is that the assumption that AI will govern itself. In reality, sort of governing Gen AI means governing the human processes it replaces or enhances, and normally that doesn't exist, quite frankly. And it's about ensuring that AI doesn't just replicate inconsistencies but improves them. So you want to bring structure, accountability, and reliability to once chaotic workflows that were in Teams or Outlook and bring that consistency. But I think to add to something you said, Cam, I think that struck me is like we need to be a bit more realistic with what we can achieve too. And I like your lower bound approach. And actually, like, you know, if we get 10%, that's still a huge improvement from what we had before, which was an ungoverned process. So I think it's also reframing and educating and having those discussions in the right way to make sure people understand that journey and bringing people on that journey with you. And I think the unexpected, to answer your question, finally, as all my waffle, is actually that I think AI governance shouldn't just be about restriction. It's about enabling trust, making decision making more auditable, and creating systems that can scale without losing that control and standardized process would be where I think I didn't expect that to be one of the key benefits from some of the solutions we've built, but that's always kind of come out as we've gone and iterated through the journey.
I think there's
100%. I think, no, go for it, Julia.
I was going to say, I really like your point about being realistic, because I think it ties nicely into the fact that we need that common language and people need to have some understanding of what AI can and can't do. And Jess, I love your points around like governing, like that's going to become so important as we've seen in like recent weeks, AI agents. Everyone's very hyped about what's going to be possible there. We're likely to see a lot of companies this year who are going to embed agentic workflows into their solutions and go beyond what we've seen with just the RAG implementations. So it's really important that that governance is thought about from day one as we then build in more complexity into these AI tools.
Completely. And I think all of this comes down to, I think a lot of the time, what we're actually shouting out for is more human capital investment in AI. That's something we've spoken a lot about inside Kubrick. It's one thing to get sponsorship, budget, resource, human capital investment from our end users. We're asking people, spend time with us. Let us understand what your problems are. Let us map your process so we can better measure our accuracy. I think, Jess, we've even joked about a sort of like bronze, silver, gold package for AI, for Gen AI deliverables of like, we can give you bronze, we can give you 80% accuracy on the current process as it stands, just based on, you know, you sending us a bunch of PDFs and we uploading them as a data source. But if we spend time with your people who are on the ground doing this, we can build you this sort of like gold standard accuracy and gold standard kind of level of augmentation. And that's the other thing, right? We're not talking in terms of replacement, we're talking in terms of augmentation, and we need to kind of expand people's minds about what Gen AI can actually do for them. There's a lot of fear around replacement, but what we found, particularly in the more transformative projects like what we're doing with UCL and the use of generative AI to uncover bias and systematic reviews of disease, like that is something that has to absolutely be done by PhD level professional, that kind of systematic review. But what the tool has actually enabled them to do is not run their review processes, completely hands off, but rather scour the thousands of research papers that exist on the internet to find trends and hypothesis test with only 50 to 70% accuracy. That's the POC we were able to achieve in just a few weeks. But that kind of sense tests what are the areas of medicine we should be studying in more detail, because it's flagging these trends and hypotheses so that a human can go do the work with the right sense of direction to what they're trying to invest their time in. So I think there's a lot of different ways you need to be framing these solutions. And I think that can happen across domains, but it's definitely a mindset change, and definitely something I think the more that you, Jess and Julia, speak with your end users, kind of the better the product ends up being. So before we wrap up, we've just got a couple of minutes. I wanted to know if either of you had a final takeaway, a final point, a final bit of kudos for the other, for any of the kind of points that they've made, because I've also loved how much you guys have celebrated each other's perspectives on this. That's been great to see.
I think my takeaway for everyone would be just really engage with that cross calibration between different teams, because I think that is really key to success from moving to proof of concept to MVP.
I think to go back to the very beginning point, it's that mature, simple process. Don't choose a huge use case, control the different variables that you have, and just try and prove out one theory and make it a simple, easy to prove proof of concept before moving on through the stages, to avoid wasting your own time and other people's.
Amazing. Look at that. We managed to condense into 28 minutes, which is pretty astounding. In the name of keeping it to 30 minutes, we haven't enabled Q&A at this time, but we will be sending around the recording of this. We will be passing on Jess and Julia's contact details if anybody wants to get in touch, ask some questions, put in that time. We're always happy to share that expertise, and we will be continuing the conversation in this topic into the more nuance of the technology at stake here, in further webinar series, including one with women in data that's coming up next month. So if you're already a member of that community, you'll hear more about that soon. Otherwise, we will share details on that. So thanks everyone so much for joining. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Julia. This was a great whistle stop tour.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.